All right, so I'm sitting here with Cesar Kuriyama from 1 Second Every Day, and I'm really excited to chat with him today about mindfulness and how we develop the app 1 Second Every Day. So, Cesar, thank you so much for joining our virtual coffee shop here and coming on the show. Welcome.
Pleasure. Love doing these kind of things, and I'm having my coffee here, and I'm really pumped.
Cheers to you, my friend. Awesome.
Okay.
So, all right. So just curious here. Now, I know you have a lot of coffee shop conversations, and you mentioned that a little bit in your TED Talk there. So what is one recent great conversation you had over a cup of coffee?
So I'm not going to have like a very specific answer to this, but I'll say that I'm really fortunate that a lot of people have seen stuff like my Kickstarter and my TED Talk, and they'll reach out with app ideas or general seeking of advice for things that they think I might have some expertise in, and I love paying it forward. A lot of people helped me out over coffee when I was trying to figure things out for myself, and I spend a lot of time in New York coffee shops, like having meetings with people about just stuff that they're working on, stuff that they're thinking through. And at some point a couple of months ago, I became just totally like overwhelmed by it. Like it was becoming so much that I couldn't focus on it was kind of breaking up my week in ways that I couldn't focus on the things that I really needed to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt this guilt of wanting to help, but also not having time for it. And one day I had these like 7 emails, and I was trying to coordinate coffees with 7 people at the same time, and it was just killing me. And
Seven different coffee conversations?
Correct.
Wow,
yeah.
That's a lot.
Like in my inbox, just and there's like a lot of back and forth. Like, oh, at like 3 p.m. on Monday. Like, oh, actually, that's not good. And like having that separate conversation with 7 different people just made me kind of have a breaking point, where I posted this thing on Facebook where I said, well, basically, I just I told them all like Tuesday 2 p.m. at this coffee shop. If you can make it, that'd be awesome. And like 3 of them were able to make it, and we ended up. It was like I've only met one of them once, and the other 2 I've never met before. And we all just had like a group chat over the course of an hour 15, 20 minutes, where we, over coffee, each kind of took a turn talking about the stuff we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being, I think, more productive than the usual thing, than the usual just one-on-one. And everybody got, I think, more out of it because they were able to see other perspectives on the same thing. And so I've been doing that ever since. I just kind of on the cuff came up with a name to put into my calendar, and I called it ACT, which was Advice Coffee Time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done now like maybe 7 of them or so, and it's given me a lot more time in my week, and it's been, I think, far more fruitful for all people involved. So I've basically, my general answer to you is I've been having really interesting, fascinating conversations over coffee the past like 2 to 3 months with really talented individuals.
That's great. That's such a great idea, though, because I know I've heard a lot of people say that, and myself included. And I think one of my favorite things is really getting together with a group of people and some people that I don't know. And for instance, someone else I had on the show, Dory Clark, I was talking to her in the city. And all of a sudden, she had another meeting. She says, "Hey, just want to stick around for a little bit and talk." And so it was this other guy who joined, and then a couple others, and we ended up having just a really cool conversation. And I learned so much from listening to them as well. I think that's a great idea. So it's called ACT. I like that. What's it called? The Active Coffee Time or
Advice Coffee Time.
Advice Coffee Time. I love that. I'm going to steal that if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, man. So what book are you currently reading?
I'm reading probably 2 books right now. I usually read nonfiction, and I always felt guilty about reading fiction, just because I always just kind of told myself like, oh, I could be learning about something instead of like some fiction kind of thing. And about 3 years ago, I think it feels like 3 years ago or so, a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, said, "Hey, you have to read this book, Ready Player One." And I thought, "Oh, what's it about?" And he's like, "Just, you got to trust me." And then, it was fiction though. And I was like, "All right, I trust you." So I bought it on Kindle, but I just never made time for it. And then like a couple of months later, somebody was like, "Cesar, have you read Ready Player One?" And I was like, "Oh, no, but I bought it, but I haven't read it." And so, but I still didn't read it. And then it kept creeping up, every couple of weeks, couple of months, somebody would say something along the lines of like, have you heard of Ready Player One? And I'm like, yeah, but man, I guess I really need to read this book. And I was on a flight recently and I just finally said, hey, all right, enough of this, like, fiction, like banning of literature, just start reading it. And within 2 chapters, I hated myself for not listening to everybody earlier, because I feel like I learned more in those 2 chapters than I maybe have like learned from like a lot of the like nonfiction books that I've been reading. And it just instantly dawned on me that like fictionalized stuff is just as important to like really get a different perspective on things than a here's the facts kind of book.
I'm totally with you. I do the same thing. I love nonfiction, and like for instance, have you read Give and Take by Adam Grant?
I have not.
That's a good one. You might like that. But I like reading books like that, and same thing that goes with fiction. But yeah, that's beautifully put, Cesar. I mean, the beauty of fiction is it really allows you to go into a fantasy world and then come back to the reality with a new perspective, a new angle. So what's that book about? Ready Player. What is it called? Ready Player One.
Ready Player One. Yeah, like what I love about it, it kind of takes place like 20 years from now or so, in like, and the reason that the world that they built is like totally plausible to me. What I loved about it is that it totally, I think, gives a glimpse at where all this technology stuff is going. I mean, it's really just a super fun book about like the 80s is really popular because of this like insane contest that's going on where the prize is like basically taking the fortune of this guy that died that was like grew up in the 80s. And so for somebody like me who grew up in the late 80s or like 90s, all the cultural references in that book are just, I mean, it's just nostalgia central. But essentially the way that I like to interpret the book, and I'm not quite finished with it, I only started like 2 weeks ago, but like the way that I like to interpret the book is basically like, if you kind of play out where technology is going, like in like 20 years ago we had like Game Boys, and now we have all this crazy Oculus Rift stuff, and you play out kind of environmentally what we might be doing to the planet, with we're like if environmentally speaking things continue to get worse, and technology wise we continue to make things more real, more realistic, more lifelike, then at some point those 2 paths cross. And you have people who live in horrible places who would rather live, connected to this device in places that are virtual, but that like give them an escape from the harsh, horrible, overpopulated, overpolluted, like real life situations. And so they've like this book kind of builds this incredible like feasible world where like people, you go to school through an Oculus Rift essentially. It's not an Oculus Rift; it's all this other stuff, but like it's kind of like where the Oculus Rift can go, and you can see why some like maybe only a rich person could go to a school where you actually show up and you are there, but it could be totally cheap for somebody to go to school in a virtual world where they're just connecting to a headset.
Right.
It's fascinating. The kind of the it's a super fun book. Like it's like almost like a technological Harry Potter kind of thing.
All right.
But what I take away from it the most is just the world building around like where things could end up going technologically.
I got to check that out. I love that. It sounds like a really interesting, almost dystopic look at, actually being able to live in an alternate reality if you really wanted to. And it's scary to think that we might, or we could possibly be heading that way. So, all right, I'll have to check that out. Thank you so much for the suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump in a little bit then into 1 Second Every Day and a little more specific to your background here. And we're going to talk about how you developed the app as well before we close out. So, well, first of all, just really quickly, and highly suggest all our listeners, I'm with over, almost 2 million views, I think, right now on the TED Talk. Probably most of our listeners have already seen this. I mean, when I told a lot of people I was talking to you, they're like, oh, 1 Second Every Day. I remember seeing that. That's awesome. And so they're like, oh, but I can't wait to talk to you. I can't wait to listen to it. But just really quickly, for those who are living under a rock and haven't seen it yet, it's only, I think, an 8-minute TED Talk or something like that. Just really quickly, what led you to creating the 1 Second Every Day app and then initially speaking at TED?
Sure. The quick version of the story is I was working in advertising for for many years after art school, and I really wasn't satisfied creatively. And but I kind of felt stuck. Like, what else am I going to do with my life? You know, like this is kind of what I studied, and I didn't really see. I spent so many hours. I mean, I was working 100-hour work weeks on these crazy deadlines all the time, and I knew I wasn't happy, but I didn't know what to do. And then I saw this TED Talk by Stefan Sagmeister, who is also an alumni of Pratt, where I went to art school, and he explained how every 7 years he closes down his like design studio and gives everybody takes a year off to do whatever they want, and he talks about how what an incredible impact that has on all the art, all the work that they do for the next 7 years. And that's the moment when it dawned on me that what I needed to do was not find what I'm going to do instead of this, but I just need to buy myself time so that I can explore and not worry about all the day-to-day minutia of life. So I saved up for 2 years. Like basically, I cut my paycheck in half. Like I had half of it go directly into a bank account that I didn't touch. I lived frugally for 2 years, and then on my 30th birthday, quit my job, and I just said, all right, I'm going to take a year off, just like do whatever. And leading up to, and like the 5-6 months leading up to that moment where I was going to quit my job, I was thinking like, man, like 10 years ago when I was like 20, like that's all this giant blur now, you know, like I don't really remember a lot of details about those days. I mean, I know I was at Pratt, I know I had, you know, these classes, but you know, what was my day-to-day life like? I don't really remember many details about it. So I was thinking to myself, man, does that mean when I turn 40, I'll barely remember my like this magical year off, you know, like if and I was just so eternally frustrated with that, and I've always been frustrated with my memory as far as I can remember. So I thought, well, I need to hack my memory somehow. What can I do to make sure that I can remember like this magical year off, and also make it so easy to do that like even I can do it. Like even I won't stop doing it. Like because I have a really low bar for myself typically of like being able to keep habits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so basically all that kind of, you know, developed to like this rule of like, all right, well, I have this high definition camera in my pocket at all times with an iPhone now. Like I basically always have it with me. Like I can't be too lazy to once a day just record something. And that, you know, that became, and that made me, you know, I crunched it real quick, and it's like, all right, that would mean like I'd have this 6-minute video that's every single day of my year off. And after those first couple of weeks of doing it, I realized, whoa, this is having like a really incredible impact on my like decision making, and how it made me realize it made me really aware of how I was using my time. It made me really aware of how much you know, time I would spend like on Facebook or something and stuff like that. And and then it was so easy to do. I was literally just like, I take a camera out, take a quick, you know, video and be done. So I thought, well, being that this is having such a positive impact on my life, why don't I just do this for the rest of my life? And I doubt I'm not going to have some, you know, phone in my pocket for you know, anytime soon. So you know, that led to that year off ended with the way that it got to a TED Talk was that 3 months into the project, TED posted about the first ever TED auditions. And I was a huge TED junkie. In the same way that, you know, a TED Talk by Stefan Sagmeister inspired me to quit my job and take time off, like, I saw that and I thought, holy crap, if only I had an idea worth spreading, which I genuinely just didn't think I had. But I left the tab open on my browser. Like, it just stayed there. It's like, the first ever TED auditions, and submit a 1-minute video of your talk. And it wasn't until like a week later that I was like recording my second of the day, I think at my dad's birthday. And I thought, whoa, this 1-second thing I'm doing could be like an idea worth spreading, but it's so silly. It's just like me recording a second per video of day. But I kind of just got it in my head that if I don't try, I'll regret it forever. And so that was like the clincher for submitting an audition, was just like, I don't want to regret this forever, not trying. So I just need to try. So I was like, I tried. Like, but I was positive I wouldn't get in. And yeah, I ran home. I submitted the audition video literally with like, I think like 7 seconds to spare. Like I was waiting for the YouTube upload to finish before the deadline for submissions. And I was like freaking out. And barely got that submission into them with like literally seconds to spare. It was like 11:59 p.m. when I hit the send button to Ted.
Did that bring you back to flashbacks at 20 in college with deadlines?
Oh man, deadlines, man. It's they're good and they're bad, but so yeah, and then 2 weeks later, got an email from them. It's my second of the day saying, hey, you've been selected to, and then out of like 1,000 submissions or so, 17 of us flew from all over the world. I took the subway to New York, to a stage in New York, and there were all these testers there who voted on everyone, and four of us ended up at the real TED stage like 8 months later, and we had to keep it I had no idea if anybody else got in, but we had to keep it a secret.
That's great. Wow, I didn't realize that was the story behind it. So you're allowed to tell that now, right?
Yes.
All right, cool.
I wasn't allowed to tell it until they announced the speakers, which they keep a secret until like a month before the conference.
So, I mean, this is a very loaded question here, and obviously it's really changed your life for the better, but can you speak a little bit about what it's done personally for you?
Like the project for me personally, or like the app and that stuff, or
either or, whichever.
Sure. I'm 3.5 years in now on recording 1 second per day, which is insane to me because in some respects it feels like yesterday when I was like, hey, I'm gonna start doing this thing, and then like in some respects it's like, wow, it's been a long time, and it's funny because as time progresses, like my video now is like 21 minutes long, and in 21 minutes it's like 3.5 years of my life, and one of those things that I think about often is if I had been recording 1 second of every day in high school, and I think about who I was the day that I got like my first day of freshman year and who I was my last day of graduation, completely, totally different human being. Right. The evolution that happens in that span is insane. College, same deal. Like who I was going into art school, who I was going out, not remotely the same person, and so like I'm about to reach the 4-year mark in about 6 months, and I can already, when I look back in those first couple of seconds of my video, it's like that person I was of just like I assumed, I remember exactly how I feel in a lot of those moments. I remember just totally assuming that after my year off, I would just go right back to working in advertising. Like what else am I going to do? One idea was to go back to school, study something else. But watching that kind of like year 2 of my second everyday video, which doesn't have a lot of views, like not a lot of people have seen it because it and didn't go viral or anything. It's not as like I'm not out traveling the world. I'm like building an app, so it's like a lot less interesting. But I look back on that, and it's like going through that process of trying to build an app from like basically knowing nothing about how to build an app was something that is hard to quantify, and watching that video is just like, oh, just like this, like the stress and the emotions involved all come right back. The interesting thing about 1 second every day is that like somebody can look at my 1 second every day video and think, oh, so cool, this and that or whatever, but the beautiful thing about like people who do start their own 1 second every day video is that they realize quickly. One of the emails that I get the most is people kind of being like, oh, I get it now, because the context of the seconds is theirs. They know what those mean. It's not just images. It's like there's a lot of context behind everything that's being recorded, and so that happens to me a lot, where like some of the least interesting looking seconds that would look like nothing to most people are the most important seconds of my life. There's a second in my video where it's literally like the side of a wall. It looks like nothing. It just looks like a color, and I know that that's the exact moment I had just finished talking to somebody about some like really huge, deep stuff, and like to anybody watching it, it's just like a color on a wall. But to me, it's like, man, like just every time I look at that second, I'm crushed because of the intensity of that conversation.
That's amazing that just the wall brings back that flood of emotions to you. And I think that, that's something that I just want to briefly just talk about here. I did the same thing too. And I had this, when I first saw your video, I had this moment, this flashback to a moment in my life where I remember looking at a picture of myself when I was I don't know how old I was. I would have been like 9 or 10. It was at a stage in my life where my friends called me Baby Blue because I had these huge teeth and this, I think little boy haircut, as my mother put it, or something like that. And I was staring at this picture, and the little boy in the picture had this direct eye contact at me. And it was a picture of me. But I had this very existential kind of crisis going on, is that really me? I have no clue who this boy is. It really could just be any random boy that has a resemblance to me. You know what I mean? And I was thinking about when I saw your video, I'm like, man, what if I was able to just have that little second of what my life was like back then? Like what emotions would come flooding in? So I'm really glad that you bring that up. And let's dive in and talk a little bit directly about the app here. Well, first of all, actually, before we do that, can you share just maybe a story of someone who has reached out to you and expressed, how the app, the 1 second every day, has influenced their life?
Just off the top of my head, one that really, I rarely share the emails that I get from 1 second every day app users, and I typically always try to reply as much as possible. And one that I really hit me was a girl that sent me this beautiful email about how she was suicidal. She had been in and out for suicidal tendencies and stuff from care and stuff, and she just talked about how she saw my TED Talk and then she started using the app. And I mean, I still don't understand necessarily how and why the app helped her, but that blew me away. That's something I never ever in 1,000 billion years would have imagined would be a situation that where the app could be help somebody like that. So yeah, I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind as far as an email that just kind of destroyed me.
That's beautiful, though. And, well, I'll try to answer your question if you don't mind. I think this is what initially turned me on to bringing you on the Traveling Cup. And on that note, really quick, I'm going to shoot a little 1 second video here. So to our audience, if we're watching this on YouTube here.
Good.
All right. Awesome. All right. Oh, yeah, there we go. Hey. All right, cool. So what was I getting at? Okay. I think it's mindfulness, and this is what initially turned me on to when I came across, I forget who, I think it was actually a former student of mine, and because I initially showed your video 1 second every day, the TED Talk, to my students, my seniors, and I think a former student sent it to me again, or had posted it on Twitter or something along those lines, and I said, you know what, the beautiful thing about this right now, and at this stage in my life, I was really thinking about meditation and mindfulness and what things can I do during the day to help me concretize my goal of being more mindful. Because what is a mindfulness? It's being aware of the present, right? Or at least that's one aspect of it. And I think with what your app does and what your idea does is it forces someone to say, holy crap, if I'm going to record something, it better be worth it. And therefore, I need to, and then I think, the power of small habits over time, eventually what it does is it gets you to do more things that would be memorable. You know what I mean? And so I think with that person right there, with the suicidal tendencies, it forced her to maybe think of the positive in her life, right? And I mean, I think that's beautiful. So perhaps that's one issue or one way right there that helps you make you more mindful. So
that is something that comes up a lot, which is it makes people really think on what the positive in their life a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about the app then, if you don't mind. And like I said, when I first showed your talk to my class and I was looking at it, I said, this guy needs to make an app with this. And I was like, if I knew how to make an app, I would, because it just would make it so much easier. And then, lo and behold, it wasn't too long after I saw that you had come up with the app. So for our listeners out there that are change makers and entrepreneurial, and they're looking at making an app, can you briefly tell us, how did you go from the TED Talk to creating the app, and maybe just, talk a little bit about how, who you reached out to and how long it took and all that.
Sure. So it was somewhere along the time of during my year off. I think I was on a 90 on my 95-day like road trip that I took around the U.S. and Canada. That just sitting around, I thought, man, maybe this. I mean, at the time, I had now known that I was going to give a TED talk on the project. I found out like during the trip, like I got the email saying, we want you to come speak, and I thought, this is having such a positive impact on my life. I wonder if I could it would be possible to build something that would help other people do the same thing. I mean, I have a background in video and animation and stuff. Like for me to edit these videos together isn't like that big a deal, but it would be a taxing ordeal for someone with no experience whatsoever.
Yeah, like me.
Exactly. So, that's kind of when it just kind of hit my head. I think when I auditioned for TED, I did blurt out like I'm going to build an app, like by just because I was like super nervous. But I didn't quite mean it. I was just just blabbing. I was so nervous. And then when I gave the talk, just kind of starting to get people's reactions from it. And the most popular thing people would say would like, I want to do this too. I'm starting today. Like boom, right now. And so I had no idea how I was going to build an app. I literally started with Google, how do I build an app? I started at square one, like nothing. I had zero knowledge. Started reading blogs and stuff, and all right, like I need developers who can do this kind of coding. I have to decide iOS or Android, which was became pretty clear early on that I should go iOS for many reasons. Then it became like, all right, I need to find developers, and so I started reaching out to any development shop that I could find in New York City. I learned that I needed to have like a non-disclosure agreement. So I figured out how to do a non-disclosure agreement, would have them sign it so that I could protect the idea, just to be precautious. I would set up I would have conversations over the phone or at offices about like, I wrote up like a one sheet kind of like, this is what the app is, and with some mock-ups of exactly how it will work. And a lot of it came from just me closing my eyes and saying like, all right, I've been doing this for a year. What do I wish existed based on my 1 year doing this, and and I closed my eyes and I was just like, it looks like a calendar, and I click on a date and these are the videos from that day, and I just moved this little nub over to the moment and I'm done, and like that should be super easy. And I started getting ballpark figures of what it would cost to build this, and it was astronomical. People generally, like I just came off my year off, I had no money, and there was just like, well, there's no way this is gonna My initial thought after the initial conversations was, oh, this is not going to happen, because it was just way more money that I could ever afford. Then I also kind of looked into, I started learning about seed funding and stuff like that for companies. And one of the things that I noticed about like trying to getting a seed round of funding is that investors are looking for a lot of quick growth. Growth. You got to keep getting users. And 1 second, it really wasn't, at least how I envisioned it at first, wasn't really an instant share platform. It's a platform where you're building up, and then to a one big share of this is my 6 months, or this is a year of my life,
Right.
So I didn't see where's the angle here where I'm going to have users, sharing all the time to have people download this thing all the time. So eventually I just thought, well, Kickstarters, I was a big Kickstarter junkie. Kickstarter is this incredible place where people are just throwing ideas, and I just love that platform, and have for many years since I got going. Yep. And essentially I got lucky after months and months of just having conversations with developers who didn't really give two craps about 1 second every day. They were just like, this is what it'll cost to build this, and we don't care about the ethos. We just care about getting paid for our time, essentially. And
that had to be a little bit disheartening.
For sure. I think in some respects, you fall in love with your idea, no matter what it is. It could be 1 second every day. It could be anybody's idea, and you just, when you think something's a good idea, you just assume that everybody's just going to be like, "Oh my God, that's genius! Why doesn't that exist yet?" And so in my little bubble, I probably thought, "Oh my God, people are going to want to work on this thing," and the truth is, like, most people are just going to work on it because they're getting paid for it. No one's working at like Facebook because they're like, this is my calling. Like probably, I mean, maybe some, but like it's probably because they're paying you really well for your talents.
Yeah, and you get free food and stuff like that.
Yeah, you get healthcare and vacations, paid vacations. And anyway, so I got really lucky, after months of just basically meeting with anybody who would give me time. I was serendipitously at an agency like gathering, and I didn't know anybody but my one friend who was visiting from LA. So, and he had like tons of friends there, and so I was like, oh, I'm not gonna take up too much of his time, so I'll just do the like, "Hi, I'm Cesar" to random people. And this one guy's like, I'm like, "What do you do?" He's like, "Oh, I develop apps." And I'm like, "Oh my God, like, do you have a card? Can we set up a meeting? Like, I'm trying to build this thing." And 2 weeks later, I was he was a partner at a dev shop here in Brooklyn. And they 2 weeks later, they came back to me, and they were the first guys who were like, "Listen, we really want to be the guys who make this. Like, we really believe in it. We want to work this out." That's awesome. And that's priceless, that's having people who are passionate about it like that is like unquantifiably better than just people who are just looking to just continue to get paid for their time. And they, I worked with them for like 6 months on it, and they believed in me to be able to raise the money on Kickstarter, which was incredible. Because I was able to, I had enough savings to just get to a prototype essentially, but not to finish it. And the Kickstarter, ended up going viral and blew up. And, luckily I was able to pay them for their time.
So how long did it take then from when you got the funding through Kickstarter to when you were able to then send out the first edition of it to the iOS?
Well, the guys had such faith in me to get the funding that they got it to a place where I can demo the app on the Kickstarter.
Great.
So we weren't finished. There was a lot of work to do, and we literally, like, through Christmas, because people wanted to start on New Year's Day, and we worked our butts off. But we were in a place where we were close enough, and so it took like 6 months from the first meeting to like launch, and it took about 4.5 months to launching that Kickstarter campaign. And when the Kickstarter campaign ended, we were able to launch literally 2 weeks later. But it was horrifying. I mean, we on the one side, oh my God, we were like next to Instagram because we made it free for 24 hours, like day one. But at the same time, we went from like having 15 people beta testing it to having like, tens of thousands of people using it, and everything was broken, So it's like, oh, we didn't test it on iPhone 3 GS, or we didn't think somebody would do this, or we didn't think somebody would do that. And so we spent like the next 6 weeks just like, bugging, bugs. So yeah, like we launched 2 weeks after a Kickstarter ended, which is amazing compared to most Kickstarter projects.
Yeah, right.
But it was, it took a lot of fixing along the way to get it to, we're still fixing bugs, but it's stabilized enough.
That's great. That's great to hear. I mean, that kind of goes with my favorite phrase, failing forward. Which, you get a prototype of, oh, there's a bug, and then you learn how to move forward with it. And I'm really happy to hear that Kickstarter worked for you too. It sounds like that was really helpful, obviously, and it's one of the beautiful things of living in the time that we're living now, and people were able to crowdfund it and help you out. One of the things I love about the app, by the way, just to share a quick story, is I love how the little pop-ups that come up to remind you of taking your video. And it's these cute little facts or these fun little things or these quirky little sayings that just kind of get you to think positive and take advantage of. And they're at random times too, I've noticed, during the waking hours. And they'll get me to remember to shoot my little 1-second video. And Cesar, I don't want to take up too much of your time here, so I just wanted to just very quickly just say thank you so much for coming on the Traveling Cup podcast. I mean, the one thing, and I'm going to talk to my listeners a little bit more about this when I do the intro for the show, but the one thing that I personally love about this is about the day after my wedding, my wife came down with a really serious case of Lyme disease. And so pretty much for the past 3 years, we haven't really been able to do as much as we've wanted to do. And so keeping it on the positive, has been something that's been very difficult. So we've always been looking at ways to do that. And so now with this app, that's one of my favorite things is we kind of look for an opportunity to do something that, later on we'll remember this was a very difficult time in our life, but we'll remember that brief, moment, that brief smile or something. And usually involves our cat Yoda doing something silly. But I just wanted to, tell you that I appreciate you for making that. So thank you so much. But Cesar, how can our
Beautiful to hear, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. So how can our listeners help you out before you sign off here? Besides buying the app, obviously. Which they should, because it's great.
Well, I'm in the middle of trying to take the app to the next level, and obviously the Kickstarter money went away really quickly. So it's trying to figure out ways of building out 1 second every day to be much more than what it currently is kind of like my full-time job right now, and I'm actually looking for iOS developers who might be interested in working on this full-time. Right now, it's still just been kind of a part-time thing for the guys. So it'd be I'm curious. I have some ideas for all sorts of things that we could do to really kind of bring this to a lot more people. Feel free to get in touch. I'm really easy to get in touch with. I'm at all the things: Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, it's my full name at all the things, essentially.
You have all the real estate with your name.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us this really quickly, and I'll make sure these are at the show notes here at the Traveling Cup as well. But on Twitter, it's Cesar Kuriyama, and do you mind spelling that for us?
Yeah, CESAR KURIYAMA.
Awesome. And that's yourname.com as well for the website, right?
Correct. That's my personal site.
Okay, awesome. So, Cesar, thanks again, man, for coming on the Traveling Cup podcast. I love what you're doing. You're totally creating, a better tomorrow and helping people be more mindful and positive in their daily actions. So, thanks again, Cesar. You have a wonderful day, my friend, and take care.
Thanks, man. This was super fun. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Cheers.